Your emotions are not your friend. Let me say that again. Your emotions are not your friend. They are not some sacred inner voice guiding you toward truth and happiness. They are biological reactions designed for a world that no longer exists. A world where immediate emotional responses meant the difference between life and death. But in today's world, your emotional reactions are sabotaging your success, destroying your relationships, and keeping you trapped in cycles of regret and failure. Every single day, you make decisions based on how you feel in the moment. You get triggered by a comment and fire back with something you'll regret. You feel overwhelmed and quit on your goals. You get anxious about a presentation and avoid the opportunity that could change your career. You let anger control your words and destroy relationships that took years to build. You are being controlled by chemical reactions in your brain, and you don't even realize it. But here's what the top 1% of high achievers know that you don't. They have learned the most powerful skill in human existence: the ability to not react, the ability to feel the emotion, acknowledge it, and then choose their response based on logic, strategy, and long-term thinking, instead of the primitive impulses screaming in their heads. This is not about becoming emotionless. This is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't exist. This is about taking back control of your life by mastering the space between stimulus and response. The space where your power lives. The space where your future is determined. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will never be the same person who started listening. You will have the tools, the knowledge, and the mental frameworks to control your emotions instead of being controlled by them. You will learn how to stay calm under pressure, make better decisions when stakes are high, and build the kind of unshakable inner strength that separates winners from everyone else. Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Emotional Reactivity. Most people have no idea how much their emotional reactions are costing them. They think it's normal to get triggered. They think it's human nature to lose control when things get difficult. They think that strong emotions are a sign of passion and authenticity. They are wrong, dead wrong. And this delusion is destroying their lives in ways they can't even see. Let me paint you a picture of what emotional reactivity actually looks like in the real world. You're in a meeting with your boss and colleagues. Someone challenges your idea in a way that feels disrespectful. Your heart starts racing. Your face gets hot. The voice in your head starts screaming about how unfair this is, how they don't understand your vision, how they're trying to make you look bad. And before you know it, you're defending yourself with an edge in your voice that makes everyone in the room uncomfortable. You've just damaged your professional reputation over a 60-second emotional reaction. Or maybe you're having an argument with your partner about something relatively minor. They say something that hits a nerve. Instead of staying calm and working toward a solution, you escalate. You bring up past grievances. You say things designed to hurt them because you're hurting. 10 minutes later, you've turned a small disagreement into a relationship-threatening fight that will take days to recover from. All because you couldn't control your initial emotional reaction. Here's the brutal truth that no one wants to face. Every time you react emotionally instead of responding thoughtfully, you are training your brain to be weaker. You are reinforcing neural pathways that make you more likely to lose control the next time. You are literally rewiring your brain for failure, for conflict, for regret. And the worst part is that you're doing it voluntarily. The science is clear on this. Every emotional reaction triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals flood your system, cloud your judgment, and make it impossible to think clearly. But here's what most people don't realize. These hormones don't just disappear when the situation is over. They stay in your system for hours, sometimes days, affecting every decision you make, every interaction you have, every thought that crosses your mind. This means that one emotional reaction in the morning can sabotage your entire day. That argument with your spouse affects how you perform at work. That stressful email triggers a cascade of poor decisions that ripple through your entire week. You become trapped in a cycle of reactivity, where each emotional outburst makes the next one more likely. But the cost goes deeper than just your daily performance. Chronic emotional reactivity literally changes your brain structure. Studies using brain imaging technology show that people who regularly lose emotional control have smaller prefrontal cortexes. This is the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, planning, and impulse control. In other words, the more you react emotionally, the less capable you become of thinking clearly and making good decisions. The financial cost of emotional reactivity is staggering. Think about every opportunity you've missed because you were too angry, too anxious, or too overwhelmed to think straight. Every relationship you've damaged because you couldn't keep your mouth shut when you were upset. Every goal you've abandoned because you felt discouraged and decided to quit. The compound effect of these losses over a lifetime is devastating. I've worked with executives who have lost millions of dollars because they made decisions while angry. I've seen entrepreneurs destroy partnerships that took years to build because they couldn't control their emotional reactions during negotiations. I've watched brilliant people sabotage their own careers by sending emails they wrote while frustrated or making presentations while anxious. The relationship cost is even more heartbreaking. Every time you lose control emotionally with someone you care about, you withdraw trust from the relationship bank account. You create distance. You plant seeds of resentment. Over time, these emotional reactions accumulate and destroy the very relationships that matter most to you. Your children watch how you handle emotions and learn that this is normal. Your partner starts walking on eggshells around you because they never know what might trigger you. Your colleagues begin to see you as unreliable and unstable. Your reputation becomes one of someone who can't be counted on when things get tough. But perhaps the highest cost of emotional reactivity is what it does to your relationship with yourself. Every time you lose control, you lose respect for yourself. You know that you're capable of more. You know that you could have handled the situation better. But in the moment, you felt powerless against your own emotions. This creates a cycle of self-doubt and shame that erodes your confidence from the inside out. The good news is that this is completely within your control. Emotional reactivity is not your destiny. It's not written in your DNA. It's not an unchangeable part of who you are. It's a habit. And like any habit, it can be broken and replaced with something better. The question is whether you're willing to do the work to change it. Chapter 2. Why your brain is wired to sabotage you. To understand how to control your emotions, you first need to understand why your brain seems determined to make you lose control. The truth is, your emotional responses are not random or meaningless. They are the result of millions of years of evolution, designed to keep your ancestors alive in a world full of immediate physical threats. But the world has changed dramatically, and your brain hasn't gotten the memo. Let me introduce you to the most important part of your brain that you've probably never heard of: the amygdala. This small, almond-shaped structure sits deep in your brain and serves as your personal alarm system. Its job is to scan for threats and trigger immediate responses to keep you safe. When your ancestors encountered a saber-toothed tiger, the amygdala would flood their system with adrenaline, shut down rational thinking, and prepare them for fight or flight. This response saved lives. The problem is that your amygdala can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and an angry email from your boss. It can't distinguish between a physical threat and a social threat. It treats criticism, rejection, embarrassment, and conflict as if they were life or death situations. So when your colleague questions your idea in a meeting, Your amygdala sounds the alarm just as if you were being attacked by a predator. This is called an amygdala hijack, and it happens to you more often than you realize. The moment your brain perceives a threat, rational thinking goes offline. Blood flow is redirected away from your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and impulse control, and toward your limbic system, which controls emotional responses. You literally become less intelligent when you're emotionally activated. Here's what makes this even worse. Your amygdala learns from experience, but it's terrible at learning the right lessons. Every time you have an emotional reaction to something, your amygdala files that information away as evidence that the situation was actually dangerous. This means that things that triggered you once become more likely to trigger you again. Your brain is constantly expanding the list of things it considers threats. This is why people who have been hurt in relationships become hypersensitive to any sign of rejection or abandonment. Their amygdala has learned that emotional pain is dangerous, so it starts sounding alarms at the slightest hint that it might happen again. This is why people who have been criticized at work become defensive about any feedback, even when it's constructive and well-intentioned. Your amygdala also has a negativity bias. It's much better at remembering threats than rewards, failures than successes, pain than pleasure. This made sense when survival was the primary concern, because forgetting about a threat could get you killed, while forgetting about a reward was just unfortunate. But in today's world, this negativity bias means your brain is constantly looking for problems, dangers, and reasons to be upset. Another crucial factor is that your amygdala processes information much faster than your rational mind. It can identify a threat and trigger an emotional response in as little as 12 milliseconds. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, takes at least 500 milliseconds to process the same information. This means you're reacting emotionally long before you have a chance to think rationally about what's actually happening. This is why you sometimes find yourself getting angry or anxious and then wondering why. Your emotional brain has already decided there's a threat and started preparing your body for action before your rational brain even knows what's going on. By the time you're consciously aware of feeling angry, your heart is already racing, your muscles are tense, and stress hormones are flooding your system. The modern world makes this problem even worse because we're constantly exposed to low-level stressors that keep our amygdala on high alert. Social media notifications, news headlines designed to trigger fear and outrage, work emails that demand immediate responses, traffic jams, financial pressures, relationship conflicts. Your brain is bombarded with signals that something might be wrong, which keeps your emotional alarm system in a constant state of activation. This chronic state of alert has serious consequences for your ability to think clearly and make good decisions. When your amygdala is constantly activated, it becomes hypersensitive. Things that wouldn't normally bother you start to feel overwhelming. Your threshold for emotional reactions gets lower and lower until even minor inconveniences can trigger major emotional responses. Sleep deprivation makes this even worse. When you don't get enough quality sleep, your amygdala becomes 40% more reactive to negative stimuli. This means you're literally more likely to lose emotional control when you're tired. Stress, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, and dehydration all have similar effects on your brain's ability to regulate emotions. But here's the part that will change everything for you. Understanding that your emotional reactions are automatic doesn't mean you're powerless against them. It means you can learn to work with your brain instead of against it. You can train your prefrontal cortex to override your amygdala. You can build new neural pathways that support emotional control instead of emotional reactivity. The key is recognizing that there is always a gap between the trigger and your response. It might be microseconds, but it exists. And in that gap, lies your power. That's where you can choose to respond instead of react. That's where you can take back control of your life. Chapter 3. The 4 levels of emotional mastery. Not all emotional control is created equal. Most people think that managing emotions is a simple on-off switch. Either you're in control or you're not. Either you're calm or you're reactive. This black and white thinking is exactly why most people never develop real emotional mastery. True emotional control exists on 4 distinct levels, and understanding these levels is crucial for developing the kind of unshakable inner strength that separates champions from everyone else. Level 1 is unconscious reactivity. This is where most people spend their entire lives. At this level, you are completely at the mercy of your emotions. You feel something, and you immediately act on it without any conscious choice in the matter. Someone says something that bothers you, and you fire back instantly. You feel anxious about a situation, and you avoid it without thinking. You get excited about an opportunity, and you make impulsive decisions that you later regret. People at level 1 don't even realize they have a choice in how they respond to their emotions. They believe that their feelings are facts, that their emotional reactions are justified, and that other people are responsible for how they feel. They say things like, "You made me angry," or "I can't help the way I feel," or "I was just being honest about my emotions." They have zero awareness of the gap between stimulus and response. The problem with level 1 is that it makes you completely unpredictable and unreliable. People never know which version of you they're going to get. You might be calm and reasonable one day and explosive the next, depending on your mood, your stress level, and what's happening in your life. This unpredictability destroys trust in relationships and makes it impossible for others to count on you when things get difficult. Level 2 is conscious reactivity. This is where you become aware that you're having an emotional reaction, but you choose to act on it anyway. You know you're angry. You know you're about to say something you'll regret, but you do it anyway because it feels justified in the moment. You recognize that you're being controlled by your emotions, but you tell yourself that this situation is different, that this time your reaction is warranted. People at level 2 often justify their emotional reactions by focusing on the behavior of others. They say things like, "Yes, I lost my temper, but did you see what they did to me?" Or, "I know I shouldn't have sent that email, but they had it coming." They have awareness but no real control. They see the gap between stimulus and response, but choose not to use it. Level 2 is actually more frustrating than level 1 because you know better, but you still can't seem to stop yourself. You become trapped in a cycle of emotional reactions, followed by guilt and regret, followed by promises to do better next time, followed by more emotional reactions. This creates a pattern of self-disappointment that erodes your confidence and self-respect over time. Level 3 is conscious response. This is where real emotional mastery begins. At this level, you feel the emotion. You recognize it for what it is, and you consciously choose how to respond based on your values and your long-term goals rather than your immediate feelings. You might feel angry, but you choose to speak calmly. You might feel anxious, but you choose to take action anyway. You might feel disappointed, but you choose to focus on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. People at level 3 understand that emotions are information, not instructions. They recognize that feeling angry doesn't mean they have to act angry. They know that feeling anxious doesn't mean they're in actual danger. They have learned to create space between what they feel and how they respond, and they use that space to make choices that align with who they want to be, rather than how they happen to feel in the moment. This level requires significant practice and self-awareness. You have to become skilled at recognizing your emotional states as they arise, understanding what triggers them, and having a repertoire of alternative responses ready to deploy. You have to train yourself to pause, breathe, and think before you act. This doesn't happen overnight, but it is absolutely achievable with consistent effort. Level 4 is emotional alchemy. This is the highest level of emotional mastery, where you not only control your response to emotions, but actually transform the emotions themselves. Instead of just managing anger, you transform it into motivation. Instead of just coping with fear, you transform it into excitement. Instead of just dealing with disappointment, you transform it into curiosity about what you can learn from the experience. People at level 4 have developed such a deep understanding of their emotional patterns that they can often prevent negative emotions from arising in the first place. They have restructured their thinking patterns, their beliefs, and their mental models in ways that naturally generate more positive emotional states. When negative emotions do arise, they have the skills to quickly transform them into something more useful. This level is not about positive thinking or pretending that negative emotions don't exist. It's about developing such mastery over your internal state that you can consciously choose what to feel in any given situation. You become the director of your own emotional experience rather than just an actor reading from a script you didn't write. The journey from level 1 to level 4 doesn't happen in a straight line. You might be at level 3 in some areas of your life and level 1 in others. You might handle work stress like a champion, but completely lose control when dealing with family drama. The goal is not perfection, but progress. Each level represents a significant upgrade in your ability to create the life you want, rather than just reacting to the life that happens to you. Most people never make it past level 2 because they don't understand that emotional mastery is a skill that can be developed. They think that some people are just naturally good at controlling their emotions while others aren't. This is completely false. Emotional control is like physical fitness. Some people might have better genetics, but anyone can get stronger with consistent training. The question you need to ask yourself is this: what level are you operating at right now? And more importantly, what level do you want to be operating at? Because once you make the decision to upgrade your emotional operating system, everything in your life will begin to change. Chapter 4: The Stop Method for Immediate Emotional Control. When you're in the middle of an emotional reaction, when your heart is racing and your mind is spinning, and every instinct in your body is telling you to lash out or run away or do something you'll regret, you need a system. You need a method that you can deploy immediately, in real time, to regain control before you do permanent damage to your relationships, your reputation, or your goals. Most advice about emotional control is useless in these moments because it requires you to think clearly when thinking clearly is exactly what you can't do. When you're emotionally hijacked, your prefrontal cortex is offline. You can't access complex strategies or remember detailed frameworks. You need something simple, something automatic, something that works even when your rational mind has temporarily left the building. This is where the STOP method comes in. 4 letters that represent 4 actions you can take in sequence to interrupt an emotional reaction and regain control of yourself before you make decisions you'll regret. This method is based on decades of neuroscience research and has been tested in the most high-pressure situations imaginable, from emergency rooms to battlefields to boardrooms. S stands for STOP. The moment you notice that you're having an emotional reaction, you must physically stop whatever you're doing. If you're typing an angry email, take your hands off the keyboard. If you're in the middle of an argument, close your mouth. If you're about to make an impulsive decision, step away from the situation. This physical stopping action sends a signal to your brain that you're taking control. The key to making this work is developing the ability to recognize the early warning signs of emotional activation. Your body always gives you clues before your emotions completely take over. Your heart starts beating faster. Your muscles tense up. Your breathing becomes shallow. You feel heat rising in your face or a knot forming in your stomach. These physical sensations are your cue to stop everything and implement the method. Most people miss these early warning signs because they're not paying attention to their bodies. They're lost in their thoughts, focused on the external situation, completely unaware of what's happening internally until they're already in full reaction mode. Learning to tune into your physical sensations is like installing an early warning system that gives you time to implement control strategies before it's too late. The stop action needs to be decisive and complete. You can't sort of stop or partially stop. You have to completely disengage from whatever you were doing. This might feel awkward at first, especially if you're in the middle of a conversation or a meeting. But the temporary awkwardness of stopping is nothing compared to the lasting damage of saying or doing something you'll regret. T stands for take a breath. Not just any breath, but a specific type of breathing that activates your parasympathetic nervous system and begins to calm your emotional reaction. You're going to breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 4. Then breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. This is called box breathing, and it's used by Navy SEALs, emergency responders, and elite athletes to maintain calm under extreme pressure. The reason this breathing pattern works is that it stimulates your vagus nerve, which is like a reset button for your nervous system. When you're emotionally activated, your sympathetic nervous system is in control, flooding your body with stress hormones and preparing you for fight or flight. The extended exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and recovery. This begins to counteract the stress response and helps restore rational thinking. You need to repeat this breathing pattern at least 3 times, but continue for as long as necessary to feel your heart rate beginning to slow down. Don't rush this step. The goal is not just to calm down enough to function, but to calm down enough to think clearly and make good decisions. This might take 30 seconds, or it might take 5 minutes. Give yourself whatever time you need. O stands for observe. Now that you've stopped the action and begun to regulate your nervous system, you need to objectively observe what's actually happening, both internally and externally. What emotion are you feeling? What thoughts are running through your mind? What physical sensations are you experiencing? What is actually happening in the external situation, as opposed to what you're interpreting or assuming is happening? This observation step is crucial because emotional reactions are often based on interpretations rather than facts. Someone doesn't return your text message, and you interpret that as rejection or disrespect, when they might just be busy. A colleague challenges your idea, and you interpret that as a personal attack, when they might just be trying to make the project better. Your partner seems distant, and you interpret that as evidence they don't love you anymore, when they might just be stressed about work. During the observe step, you want to separate facts from interpretations. What did the person actually say or do? What evidence do you have for the story you're telling yourself about their motivations or intentions? What other explanations might exist for their behavior? This process of objective observation helps you see the situation more clearly and often reveals that your emotional reaction was based on assumptions rather than reality. You also want to observe your own internal state with curiosity rather than judgment. Don't beat yourself up for having an emotional reaction. Don't tell yourself you shouldn't feel the way you feel. Just notice what's happening with the same objective interest you might have in watching a nature documentary. This emotional is arising. This thought pattern is active. This physical sensation is present. Information, not evaluation. P stands for proceed. Now that you've stopped the reactive behavior, regulated your nervous system, and objectively observed the situation, You can proceed with a conscious response rather than an unconscious reaction. But this doesn't mean jumping right back into action. The proceed step involves making a conscious choice about how you want to respond based on your values, your goals, and your long-term interests, rather than your immediate emotional impulses. Ask yourself what response would be most aligned with the person you want to be and the outcome you want to create. If your goal is to maintain a good relationship with this person, what response would serve that goal? If your goal is to solve a problem, what response would be most effective? If your goal is to maintain your reputation and integrity, what response would support that goal? Sometimes the best choice in the proceed step is to not respond at all, at least not immediately. You might decide that you need more information before you can respond effectively. You might realize that you're still too emotionally activated to respond in a way that aligns with your values. You might determine that the situation doesn't actually require a response from you at all. Other times, the proceed step might involve having a conversation, but approaching it differently than you would have if you had reacted immediately. Instead of defending yourself, you might ask questions to better understand the other person's perspective. Instead of making accusations, you might express how you interpreted their words or actions and ask for clarification. The stop method becomes more powerful the more you practice it. At first, you might only remember to use it after you've already reacted emotionally. That's normal and still valuable because it helps you develop awareness of your patterns. Gradually, you'll start to catch yourself earlier in the process, maybe after you've started to react but before you've done serious damage. Eventually, you'll be able to implement the method as soon as you notice the early warning signs of emotional activation. The goal is not to never have emotional reactions. The goal is to never let those reactions control your behavior in ways that work against your best interests. The stop method gives you the tools to create space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies your power to create the life you want, rather than just reacting to the life that happens to you. Chapter 5. Advanced Techniques for Emotional Regulation. Once you've mastered the stop method and can reliably catch yourself before emotional reactions spiral out of control, you're ready for the advanced techniques that separate true masters of emotional regulation from people who just have basic impulse control. These techniques go beyond damage control and move into the realm of emotional optimization, where you don't just manage your emotions but actually use them as tools for peak performance and enhanced decision-making. The first advanced technique is cognitive reframing. This is the ability to consciously change how you interpret a situation in order to change your emotional response to it. Most people think their emotions are caused by external events, but the truth is that emotions are caused by your interpretation of events. Change your interpretation, and you change your emotional experience. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're giving a presentation, and you notice that several people in the audience are looking at their phones. Your initial interpretation might be that they're bored, that your presentation is terrible, that you're failing. This interpretation triggers feelings of anxiety, embarrassment, and self-doubt. But what if you reframed the situation? What if you interpreted their phone usage as evidence that they're so engaged with your ideas that they're taking notes or looking up related information? Suddenly, the same external situation triggers completely different emotions. The key to effective cognitive reframing is developing multiple plausible interpretations for any given situation. When something happens that triggers a negative emotional response, force yourself to come up with at least 3 alternative explanations for what's happening. One interpretation that's more positive than your initial reaction, one that's more negative, and one that's completely neutral. This exercise isn't about lying to yourself or engaging in positive thinking. It's about recognizing that your initial interpretation of events is often not the only possible interpretation, and it's usually not the most accurate one. Your brain has a tendency to jump to conclusions based on incomplete information, past experiences, and cognitive biases. Reframing forces you to consider other possibilities and choose the interpretation that's most useful for your goals and well-being. The second advanced technique is emotional labeling. This involves becoming extremely precise about identifying and naming your emotional states. Most people have a very limited emotional vocabulary. They know they feel good or bad, happy or sad, but they can't distinguish between frustration and disappointment, between anxiety and excitement, between anger and hurt. This lack of precision makes it much harder to regulate your emotions because you can't manage what you can't clearly identify. It's like trying to fix a car engine when you can only describe the problem as, "It's not working right." The more specifically you can identify what you're feeling, the more specifically you can address it. Emotional labeling works by activating your prefrontal cortex and reducing activity in your amygdala. When you put a precise name to an emotion, you literally change your brain state in ways that make the emotion less overwhelming and more manageable. Research shows that people who regularly practice emotional labeling have better emotional regulation, lower stress levels, and improved decision-making abilities. To develop this skill, start by expanding your emotional vocabulary. Instead of just feeling bad, get specific. Are you feeling disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, angry, hurt, or something else entirely? Instead of feeling good, are you feeling satisfied, excited, proud, grateful, content, or energized? The more precise you can be, the more control you'll have over your internal state. The third advanced technique is somatic regulation. This involves using your body to regulate your emotions rather than trying to control your emotions with your mind alone. Your emotional state and your physical state are intimately connected through your nervous system. By consciously changing your physical state, you can directly influence your emotional state. Progressive muscle relaxation is one of the most effective somatic regulation techniques. Starting with your toes and working your way up to your head, systematically tense each muscle group for 5 seconds. Then, release the tension and notice the feeling of relaxation. This process helps discharge the physical energy that builds up during emotional activation and sends a signal to your nervous system that it's safe to relax. Cold exposure is another powerful somatic regulation tool. Taking a cold shower, splashing cold water on your face, or even holding ice cubes can activate your vagus nerve and quickly shift your nervous system from sympathetic activation to parasympathetic recovery. The shock of the cold forces your body to adapt, which builds resilience and improves your ability to handle stress and emotional intensity. Movement and exercise are also crucial for emotional regulation. When you're emotionally activated, your body is prepared for action. If you don't provide an outlet for that energy, it stays trapped in your system and maintains the emotional state. Even a few minutes of vigorous movement can help process the energy and return your system to baseline. The fourth advanced technique is timeline reframing. This involves consciously shifting your perspective on time to reduce the emotional impact of current difficulties. When you're in the middle of an emotional reaction, your brain has a tendency to catastrophize and assume that current problems will last forever or have permanent consequences. Timeline reframing works by asking yourself how you'll feel about the current situation in different time frames. How will you feel about this in 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year? This exercise helps put temporary problems in perspective and reduces the emotional charge around them. You can also use timeline reframing to connect with your future self. Imagine yourself 5 years from now, having successfully navigated this situation and many others like it. What advice would that future version of yourself give you about how to handle the current challenge? This perspective often reveals that the situation is less serious than it initially appeared and suggests more effective responses than emotional reactivity. The fifth advanced technique is energy management. This recognizes that your capacity for emotional regulation is not unlimited. You have a finite amount of mental energy each day, and emotional regulation requires a significant portion of that energy. If you're constantly having to regulate intense emotions, you'll eventually experience decision fatigue and lose the ability to maintain control. Energy management involves being strategic about when and where you expend your emotional regulation resources. This might mean avoiding certain people or situations when you're already stressed or tired. It might mean scheduling difficult conversations for times when you're most mentally fresh. It might mean building recovery time into your day to restore your emotional regulation capacity. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management all play crucial roles in maintaining your emotional regulation energy. When you're sleep-deprived, hungry, sedentary, or chronically stressed, your capacity for emotional control is dramatically reduced. Taking care of your physical health is not separate from emotional mastery. It's an essential component of it. These advanced techniques require practice and patience to master. Don't try to implement all of them at once. Choose one or two that resonate most with you, and focus on developing competency with those before adding others to your toolkit. Remember, the goal is not to never feel difficult emotions, but to respond to those emotions in ways that align with your values and support your long-term goals. With consistent practice, these techniques will become automatic responses that serve you in any situation life presents. Chapter 6. Building Emotional Resilience for Long-Term Success. Controlling your emotions in the moment is crucial, but it's only half of the equation. The other half is building the kind of deep, unshakable emotional resilience that makes you anti-fragile. Not just strong enough to survive emotional challenges, but actually stronger because of them. This is what separates people who occasionally manage their emotions from people who have transformed their entire relationship with difficulty, stress, and adversity. Most people approach emotional resilience completely backwards. They wait until they're in crisis to try to develop coping skills. They wait until they're overwhelmed to try to build stress management techniques. They wait until they're burned out to try to create better boundaries. This is like waiting until you're drowning to learn how to swim. By the time you need the skills, it's too late to develop them effectively. True emotional resilience is built during calm periods, not during storms. It's developed through consistent daily practices that strengthen your emotional immune system so that when challenges arise, you're already prepared to handle them with grace and effectiveness. Just like physical fitness, emotional fitness requires regular training, not just crisis intervention. The foundation of emotional resilience is what I call baseline optimization. This is the daily maintenance of your mental, emotional, and physical state that keeps you operating at peak capacity. When your baseline is strong, you can handle much more stress and challenge before reaching your breaking point. When your baseline is weak, even minor difficulties can overwhelm your system. Sleep is the non-negotiable foundation of baseline optimization. When you're sleep-deprived, your amygdala becomes hyperactive, while your prefrontal cortex becomes sluggish. This means you're more likely to have emotional reactions and less able to control them. The research is absolutely clear on this. People who sleep less than 7 hours per night have dramatically reduced emotional regulation capacity. But it's not just about quantity of sleep, it's about quality. Your bedroom needs to be completely dark, cool, and quiet. No screens for at least an hour before bed. No caffeine after 2 p.m. A consistent sleep schedule that doesn't vary by more than 30 minutes, even on weekends. These aren't suggestions, they're requirements if you want to maintain emotional control under pressure. Nutrition plays a massive role in emotional stability that most people completely ignore. Your brain runs on glucose, and when your blood sugar is unstable, so are your emotions. Skipping meals, eating processed foods, consuming too much caffeine, and drinking alcohol all create biochemical conditions that make emotional regulation much more difficult. The solution is not complex, but it requires discipline. Eat protein with every meal to stabilize blood sugar. Consume omega-3 fatty acids to support brain health. Stay hydrated throughout the day. Avoid foods that cause inflammation, which includes most processed foods, excessive sugar, and foods you're sensitive to. Your emotional state is directly connected to your nutritional state, whether you realize it or not. Physical exercise is not optional for emotional resilience. When you exercise regularly, you increase production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which literally grows new brain cells and strengthens neural connections. You also increase production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which regulate mood and motivation. Perhaps most importantly, exercise provides a controlled stress that builds your capacity to handle uncontrolled stress. But the type of exercise matters. You need both cardiovascular exercise to build stress tolerance and strength training, to build physical confidence and mental toughness. You also need some form of movement that challenges your coordination and focus, like martial arts, dance, or sports. This builds the mind-body connection that's essential for emotional regulation. The second pillar of emotional resilience is cognitive flexibility. This is your ability to see situations from multiple perspectives, generate creative solutions to problems, and adapt your thinking when circumstances change. People with low cognitive flexibility get stuck in rigid thought patterns that amplify emotional reactions. People with high cognitive flexibility can find opportunity in adversity and maintain emotional equilibrium, even when things don't go according to plan. One of the most powerful ways to build cognitive flexibility is through regular exposure to different perspectives and ideas. Read books by authors who disagree with your worldview. Engage in conversations with people who have different backgrounds and beliefs. Travel to places that challenge your assumptions about how life works. The goal is not to abandon your values, but to expand your mental models and increase your ability to see situations from multiple angles. Another crucial component of cognitive flexibility is developing comfort with uncertainty and ambiguity. Most emotional reactions are triggered by situations that feel uncertain or out of control. If you can learn to be comfortable with not knowing exactly how things will turn out, you'll be much less likely to have emotional reactions when life doesn't go according to plan. Practice making decisions with incomplete information. Set goals without knowing exactly how you'll achieve them. Engage in activities that have uncertain outcomes. The more comfortable you become with uncertainty, the more emotionally stable you'll be when facing unknown challenges. The third pillar of emotional resilience is meaning-making. People who have a clear sense of purpose and meaning in their lives are much more resilient in the face of adversity. When you know why you're doing something, when you can connect your current struggles to a larger purpose, it becomes much easier to maintain emotional control when things get difficult. This doesn't require having a grand mission to save the world. It can be as simple as being a good parent, building a successful business, or making a positive contribution to your community. The key is that your goals and activities need to be connected to something larger than immediate comfort or pleasure. Regularly reflecting on your values and priorities helps maintain this sense of meaning. What do you stand for? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of impact do you want to have? When you're clear on these questions, it becomes much easier to choose long-term thinking over short-term emotional reactions. The fourth pillar of emotional resilience is social connection. Humans are social creatures, and isolation makes emotional regulation much more difficult. Having strong, supportive relationships provides both emotional resources during difficult times and accountability that helps you maintain high standards for your behavior. But not all relationships contribute to emotional resilience. Relationships with people who are constantly dramatic, negative, or emotionally volatile will drain your emotional energy and make it harder for you to maintain control. You need relationships with people who model emotional maturity and who bring out the best in you rather than triggering your worst impulses. This means being intentional about who you spend time with. Minimize contact with people who consistently create chaos and drama in their lives. Invest more time and energy in relationships with people who are growing, learning, and working to become better versions of themselves. Your emotional state is heavily influenced by the emotional states of the people around you. The fifth pillar of emotional resilience is what I call strategic stress exposure. Just like your muscles need progressive overload to grow stronger, your emotional regulation system needs controlled challenges to develop greater capacity. If you only practice emotional control during easy times, you won't have the strength to maintain it during difficult times. This means intentionally putting yourself in situations that are slightly outside your comfort zone on a regular basis. Take on projects that are challenging but achievable. Have difficult conversations that you've been avoiding. Set goals that require you to grow beyond your current capabilities. The key is to choose your challenges rather than letting life choose them for you. Cold exposure, public speaking, martial arts training, endurance sports, and meditation retreats are all excellent forms of strategic stress exposure. They put you in controlled situations where you have to manage discomfort, uncertainty, and challenge while maintaining composure and focus. The final pillar of emotional resilience is recovery and restoration. Your emotional regulation system, like any high-performance system, needs regular maintenance and recovery. If you're constantly pushing without taking time to restore your energy, you'll eventually burn out and lose the ability to maintain emotional control. This means building regular recovery practices into your daily and weekly routine. Daily meditation or mindfulness practice. Weekly time in nature without technology. Monthly periods of complete disconnection from work and social media. Annual retreats or vacations that allow for deep rest and reflection. Recovery is not a luxury or a reward for hard work. It's a requirement for sustained high performance. Without adequate recovery, your emotional regulation capacity will gradually decline, and you'll find yourself becoming more reactive, more irritable, and less able to handle the normal challenges of life. Building emotional resilience is a long-term project that requires patience and consistency. You can't develop it overnight, but you also can't afford to wait until you need it to start building it. The time to strengthen your emotional foundation is now, while you're relatively calm and stable. Because when the storms of life hit, and they will hit, you want to be the person who remains unshakable while others are falling apart around you. Chapter 7. The Neuroscience of Emotional Transformation. Everything I've taught you so far becomes infinitely more powerful when you understand what's actually happening in your brain when you practice emotional control. This isn't just feel-good psychology or ancient wisdom, though both have their place. This is hard science. Measurable, repeatable, documented changes in brain structure and function that occur when you consistently practice the techniques of emotional mastery. Understanding the neuroscience behind emotional transformation serves two crucial purposes. First, it gives you confidence that the work you're doing is actually creating real, lasting change, not just temporary improvements. Second, it helps you optimize your practice by understanding which specific actions create the most significant neurological changes. Let's start with neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. For most of human history, Scientists believed that adult brains were fixed and unchangeable. If you had certain emotional patterns or tendencies, you were stuck with them for life. We now know this is completely false. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Every time you choose a thoughtful response over an emotional reaction, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with self-control and weaken the pathways associated with reactivity. Every time you practice the stop method, you're literally building new brain circuitry that makes emotional control easier and more automatic. The key insight is that your brain doesn't distinguish between what you're thinking about and what you're actually experiencing. When you mentally rehearse staying calm under pressure, your brain creates the same neural connections as if you had actually stayed calm under pressure. This means you can accelerate your emotional development by regularly visualizing yourself handling challenging situations with grace and composure. The most dramatic neuroplastic changes occur in the prefrontal cortex, which is your brain's executive center. This region is responsible for planning, decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. People who regularly practice emotional control techniques show increased gray matter density in this area, meaning they literally have more brain tissue dedicated to rational thinking and self-control. Meanwhile, the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, actually shrinks in people who practice emotional regulation. This doesn't mean you become emotionless. It means your threat detection system becomes more accurate and less likely to trigger false alarms. You develop the ability to distinguish between real threats that require immediate action and perceived threats that can be handled through thoughtful response. The anterior cingulate cortex is another crucial region that changes with emotional training. This area is responsible for attention regulation and conflict monitoring. It helps you notice when you're having an emotional reaction and redirects your attention toward more constructive responses. People with stronger anterior cingulate cortexes are better at catching themselves before emotional reactions spiral out of control. The insula, which processes bodily sensations and connects them to emotional experiences, also becomes more developed in people who practice emotional awareness. This enhanced body awareness is what allows you to notice the early warning signs of emotional activation before they become full-blown reactions. You become more sensitive to changes in heart rate, muscle tension, breathing patterns, and other physical indicators of emotional state. One of the most fascinating discoveries in neuroscience is that emotional regulation practice actually changes the default mode network of your brain. This is the network of brain regions that's active when you're not focused on a specific task, often called the monkey mind, because it tends to jump from thought to thought without direction. In people who don't practice emotional control, the default mode network tends to generate repetitive, often negative thought patterns. Worry, rumination, self-criticism, and anxiety become the brain's default state. But in people who regularly practice emotional regulation techniques, the default mode network becomes quieter and more peaceful. Their baseline state becomes calm and centered, rather than agitated and reactive. The neurotransmitter systems in your brain also undergo significant changes with emotional training. Serotonin, which regulates mood and social behavior, increases with regular practice of emotional control techniques. Dopamine, which governs motivation and reward, becomes more stable and less dependent on external validation. GABA, your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, increases, which helps reduce anxiety and promote feelings of calm. Perhaps most importantly, the stress hormone cortisol becomes much better regulated in people who practice emotional control. Chronic elevated cortisol destroys brain cells, impairs memory, weakens the immune system, and creates a cascade of health problems. People who master their emotional responses show lower baseline cortisol levels and faster cortisol recovery, after stressful events. Mirror neurons add another fascinating dimension to emotional neuroscience. These are brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. This means that spending time with people who have good emotional control literally trains your brain to have better emotional control. Conversely, spending time with emotionally reactive people trains your brain to be more reactive. This is why the social environment you choose has such a profound impact on your emotional development. You're not just influenced by other people's behavior. Your brain is actually mimicking their neural patterns through mirror neuron activity. Choose your social environment carefully because it's shaping your brain whether you realize it or not. The research on meditation and mindfulness provides some of the clearest evidence of how emotional practices change brain structure. Studies using brain imaging technology show that just 8 weeks of regular meditation practice creates measurable changes in brain structure. The hippocampus, associated with learning and memory, increases in size. The amygdala decreases in reactivity. The prefrontal cortex becomes more active and better connected to other brain regions. But you don't need to become a meditation master to benefit from these neuroplastic changes. Any consistent practice that involves observing your thoughts and emotions without immediately reacting to them will create similar brain changes. The key factors are consistency, attention, and non-reactive awareness. Breathing exercises create particularly rapid neurological changes because the vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your body's relaxation response, can be directly influenced through conscious breathing patterns. The box breathing technique I taught you earlier literally activates your parasympathetic nervous system within seconds, creating immediate neurological changes that promote calm and clear thinking. Progressive muscle relaxation works by strengthening the connection between your prefrontal cortex and your motor cortex. When you consciously tense and release muscle groups, you're practicing voluntary control over your body's stress response system. This builds neural pathways that make it easier to consciously relax when you're emotionally activated. The cognitive reframing techniques I discussed earlier work by strengthening connections between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. Every time you consciously choose a different interpretation of events, you're building neural highways that make optimistic, solution-focused thinking more automatic and pessimistic, problem-focused thinking less automatic. Understanding these neurological mechanisms can help you stay motivated during difficult periods of your emotional development. When you're struggling to control your reactions, when old patterns seem to be reasserting themselves, when progress feels slow or non-existent, remember that your brain is literally rewiring itself at the cellular level. Changes that feel invisible from the inside are creating measurable transformations in your neural architecture. The timeline for neuroplastic changes varies depending on the specific technique and the consistency of practice, but most people begin to notice differences in their emotional reactivity within 2 to 4 weeks of regular practice. Significant structural changes in brain gray matter typically occur within 8 to 12 weeks. Complete transformation of emotional patterns usually takes 6 months to 2 years of consistent practice. This is both encouraging and sobering. Encouraging because it means that lasting change is absolutely possible and backed by hard science. Sobering because it means there are no shortcuts or quick fixes. Emotional mastery requires the same kind of patient, consistent training as physical fitness or musical skill. But here's what makes it all worthwhile. Once these neural changes become established, they tend to be permanent. Unlike temporary behavior modifications that require constant effort to maintain, neuroplastic changes create new baseline patterns that become your brain's default mode of operation. The person who struggles to control their emotions becomes the person who naturally responds with wisdom and composure. The neuroscience of emotional transformation proves that you are not stuck with the emotional patterns you developed in childhood or the reactive tendencies that have characterized your adult life. Your brain is plastic, adaptable, and constantly changing based on how you use it. Every moment of emotional control practice is an investment in the literal rewiring of your neural circuitry for greater peace, effectiveness, and life satisfaction. Chapter 8. Mastering Emotional Control in High-Pressure Situations. Everything you've learned so far gets tested when the stakes are high and the pressure is intense. It's one thing to practice emotional control during your morning meditation or when you're having a minor disagreement with a coworker. It's entirely different when you're facing a crisis that could destroy your career, end your relationship, or threaten everything you've worked to build. High-pressure situations reveal who you really are beneath the surface, politeness and social conditioning. They strip away pretense and expose your true level of emotional mastery. Most people perform worse under pressure because they let the intensity of the situation overwhelm their rational thinking. But elite performers actually get better under pressure because they've trained specifically for these moments. The difference between people who crack under pressure and people who thrive under pressure is not talent, intelligence, or luck. It's preparation. Specifically, it's emotional preparation. When you've trained your nervous system to remain calm and your mind to think clearly during intense situations, pressure becomes an advantage rather than a liability. The first key to pressure performance is understanding that pressure is not external, it's internal. The situation itself is neutral. It only becomes pressurized when your mind interprets it as threatening or overwhelming. Two people can face identical circumstances and have completely different stress responses based on how they frame the situation in their minds. This means that controlling pressure starts with controlling your narrative about the situation. Instead of telling yourself, "This is terrible, everything is falling apart, I can't handle this," you need to reframe the situation in terms that support peak performance. "This is challenging, but I have the skills to handle it. This is an opportunity to prove what I'm capable of. This is exactly the kind of situation I've been training for." Elite athletes, emergency responders, and special forces operators all use this kind of reframing to maintain peak performance under extreme pressure. They don't pretend that dangerous or difficult situations aren't actually dangerous or difficult. They acknowledge the reality of the situation while choosing interpretations that enhance rather than diminish their performance. The second key to pressure performance is physiological preparation. Your body's stress response system needs to be trained to handle intense activation without becoming overwhelmed. This is where the concept of stress inoculation becomes crucial. Just like vaccines expose your immune system to small amounts of a pathogen to build resistance, stress inoculation exposes your nervous system to controlled amounts of stress to build resilience. Cold exposure is one of the most effective forms of stress inoculation. When you deliberately expose yourself to cold water or cold air, you activate the same stress response systems that are triggered during high-pressure situations. But because you're choosing the exposure voluntarily, you can practice maintaining calm and clear thinking while your body is in a state of physiological stress. The key is not just to endure the cold, but to practice specific emotional control techniques while exposed to it. Breathe slowly and deeply. Relax your muscles. Maintain positive self-talk. Keep your mind focused on the present moment rather than anticipating how much longer the exposure will last. These are exactly the same skills you need during high-pressure situations. High-intensity exercise serves a similar function. When you push yourself to your physical limits during workouts, you're training your ability to maintain mental discipline while your body is under extreme stress. The discomfort you feel during intense exercise is similar to the discomfort you feel during high-pressure situations. Learning to stay mentally tough during physical challenges translates directly to staying mentally tough during emotional challenges. The third key to pressure performance is attention management. Under pressure, Your mind tends to scatter in multiple directions simultaneously. You start thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the people who are watching, all the consequences of failure. This divided attention makes it impossible to perform at your best because peak performance requires complete focus on the task at hand. The solution is to develop what I call laser focus. This is the ability to concentrate all of your mental energy on the specific actions you need to take right now, in this moment, to handle the situation effectively. Everything else becomes irrelevant background noise that you acknowledge but don't engage with. Developing laser focus requires practice during low-pressure situations. Set a timer for 10 minutes and choose a single task to focus on completely. Every time your mind wanders to something else, gently bring your attention back to the task. Start with simple tasks like reading a book or doing basic math problems, then gradually increase the complexity and add distractions. During high-pressure situations, use the same technique. Identify the most important action you need to take right now and focus completely on that action. Don't think about the next 10 steps, just focus on the immediate next step. Don't think about all the people who are depending on you. Just focus on the specific task in front of you. The fourth key to pressure performance is emotional granularity. Most people experience pressure as a generic feeling of stress or anxiety. But stress and anxiety are umbrella terms that cover many different specific emotions. The more precisely you can identify what you're actually feeling, the more effectively you can address it. Are you feeling anxious about the outcome? Or are you feeling excited about the challenge? Are you feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation? Or are you feeling focused by the clarity of what needs to be done? Are you feeling afraid of failure? Or are you feeling motivated to succeed? The physiological sensations might be similar, but the meanings and the appropriate responses are very different. Practice emotional labeling during calm periods so that you can access this skill during intense periods. Keep an emotion journal where you identify specific emotions you experience throughout the day. Learn the difference between frustration and disappointment, between anxiety and excitement, between anger and hurt. The more nuanced your emotional vocabulary becomes, the more precisely you can regulate your emotional state. The fifth key to pressure performance is process focus versus outcome focus. Under pressure, most people become obsessed with results. They think constantly about whether they're going to succeed or fail, what other people will think, what the consequences will be. This outcome focus creates additional pressure and divides attention away from the actions that actually determine the outcome. Elite performers focus on process rather than outcomes. They concentrate on executing the specific skills and strategies they've trained, trusting that good processes will lead to good outcomes. A surgeon focuses on making precise incisions, not on whether the patient will survive. A pilot focuses on following proper procedures, not on whether the plane will crash. A negotiator focuses on asking good questions and listening carefully, not on whether they'll get the deal. This process focus is liberating because it puts you in control of what you can actually control. You can't directly control outcomes, which always depend partly on factors outside your influence. But you can control your effort, your attention, your technique, and your attitude. When you focus on these controllable factors, pressure decreases and performance improves. The sixth key to pressure performance is contingency planning. One of the reasons high-pressure situations feel so overwhelming is that they often involve unexpected developments that we haven't prepared for. When you don't know how you'll respond if things go wrong, the uncertainty itself becomes a source of additional pressure. Elite performers reduce this uncertainty by thinking through multiple scenarios in advance and developing specific plans for each possibility. They ask themselves, what will I do if this happens? What about if that happens? How will I respond if everything goes wrong? This mental rehearsal builds confidence and reduces the cognitive load during actual high-pressure situations. But contingency planning has to be balanced with present-moment focus. You want to have plans ready for different scenarios, but once you're in the situation, you need to focus on executing your current plan rather than constantly second-guessing and revising. The time for planning is before the pressure situation, not during it. The final key to pressure performance is recovery and reflection. High-pressure situations take a significant toll on your mental and emotional resources, even when you handle them well. If you don't deliberately recover and process the experience, you'll gradually become more vulnerable to pressure rather than more resilient. After any high-pressure situation, take time to deliberately decompress. Use breathing exercises, physical movement, or relaxation techniques to help your nervous system return to baseline. Avoid making major decisions or engaging in additional stressful activities until you've had time to recover. Then, once you've recovered, reflect on the experience with curiosity rather than judgment. What worked well? What could you improve? What did you learn about yourself and your capabilities? How can you apply these lessons to future high-pressure situations? This reflection process helps consolidate the learning and builds confidence for handling similar situations in the future. Remember, pressure is a privilege. It means you're in situations that matter, facing challenges that are worthy of your best effort. Most people spend their lives avoiding pressure and therefore never discover what they're truly capable of. When you learn to thrive under pressure, you gain access to opportunities and achievements that are impossible for people who crumble when the stakes are high. Chapter 9. Transforming negative emotions into fuel for success. Most people treat negative emotions like toxic waste that needs to be disposed of as quickly as possible. They try to suppress anger, avoid sadness, eliminate fear, and escape frustration. This approach is not only ineffective, it's counterproductive. Negative emotions contain enormous amounts of energy and information that, when properly harnessed, can become rocket fuel for achieving your most ambitious goals. The problem is not that you experience negative emotions. The problem is that you don't know how to transform them into something useful. You let them drain your energy instead of directing that energy toward productive action. You let them cloud your judgment instead of using them to clarify your priorities. You let them paralyze you instead of using them to motivate breakthrough performance. Every negative emotion you experience is your psyche's way of communicating important information about your situation, your values, and your goals. Anger tells you that something important to you is being threatened or violated. Fear tells you that you're facing uncertainty or potential loss. Sadness tells you that you've lost something valuable or meaningful. Frustration tells you that you're being blocked from something you want. Instead of trying to make these emotions go away, you need to learn how to decode their messages and channel their energy in productive directions. This is the difference between emotional suppression, which weakens you, and emotional alchemy, which strengthens you. Let's start with anger, which is perhaps the most misunderstood and mismanaged emotion. Most people either explode with anger, destroying relationships and creating regret, or they suppress anger, letting it build up until it explodes anyway, or turns into resentment and bitterness. Both approaches waste the enormous energy that anger contains. Anger is your psyche's emergency response to perceived injustice or threat. It floods your system with energy and focus to help you fight back against whatever is attacking you or what you value. This energy can be destructive when directed at other people through blame, criticism, or aggression. But it can be incredibly productive when directed towards solving problems, overcoming obstacles, and creating positive change. The key to transforming anger is to separate the energy from the target. Instead of directing your anger at the person or situation that triggered it, redirect that energy toward constructive action. Use the focus and determination that anger provides to work harder on your goals, to solve problems more aggressively, to push through obstacles that would normally stop you. Some of the greatest achievements in human history have been fueled by transformed anger. Entrepreneurs who built billion-dollar companies because they were angry about problems that weren't being solved. Athletes who dominated their sports because they were angry about being underestimated. Activists who changed the world because they were angry about injustice. The emotion that destroys most people became the driving force for extraordinary success. Fear is another emotion that most people handle completely wrong. They try to eliminate fear, or they let fear paralyze them into inaction. But fear contains crucial information about what matters most to you. You only feel afraid about losing things that are valuable to you, or failing at things that are important to you. Fear is your internal guidance system pointing you toward what you need to protect or pursue. The goal is not to eliminate fear, but to dance with it. Acknowledge the fear, extract the information it's providing, then take action despite the fear. This is what courage actually is. Not the absence of fear, but intelligent action in the presence of fear. Every time you act courageously, you build confidence and reduce the grip that fear has on your life. Fear also serves as an excellent filtering mechanism for opportunities and goals. If something doesn't scare you at least a little bit, it's probably not challenging enough to be worth pursuing. The goals that frighten you are usually the ones with the highest potential for growth and achievement. Instead of avoiding these goals, let your fear guide you toward them. Sadness and disappointment are emotions that most people try to avoid at all costs, but they contain some of the most valuable information your psyche can provide. Sadness tells you what you truly value by showing you what hurts to lose. Disappointment tells you what you genuinely want by showing you what hurts not to achieve. Most people experience sadness and disappointment as pure loss, but they're actually clarifying experiences. They help you distinguish between what you think you want and what you actually want, between what others expect you to value and what you authentically value. This clarity is invaluable for making better decisions about how to invest your time, energy, and resources. Sadness also creates empathy and connection with others who have experienced similar losses. Many of the most meaningful relationships and the most impactful contributions are born from shared experiences of sadness and recovery. Instead of viewing sadness as weakness, recognize it as a sign of your capacity to love deeply and care authentically. Frustration is perhaps the most commonly experienced negative emotion in modern life, and it's also the most commonly wasted. Frustration arises when there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be, between what's happening and what you want to happen. Most people let frustration drain their energy through complaining, blaming, or giving up. But frustration is actually a signal that you care deeply about improvement and progress. The energy of frustration can be transformed into determination and persistence. Instead of being frustrated by obstacles, become fascinated by them. Instead of being frustrated by setbacks, become more committed to finding solutions. Instead of being frustrated by other people's limitations, become more focused on developing your own capabilities. Frustration is also an excellent diagnostic tool for identifying areas where you need to develop new skills or strategies. If you keep getting frustrated by the same types of situations, it's usually because you're trying to solve new problems with old approaches. The frustration is telling you that it's time to upgrade your capabilities. Anxiety and worry are forward-looking emotions that most people experience as pure torture. But anxiety contains important planning information about potential challenges you need to prepare for. Instead of trying to eliminate anxiety, use it as a strategic planning tool. What specifically are you worried about? What would you need to do to address those concerns? How can you prepare for the challenges you're anticipating? The key is to transform vague anxiety into specific action plans. Most anxiety is caused by unclear threats and uncertain timelines. When you force yourself to get specific about what you're worried about and what you can do about it, anxiety often transforms into useful preparation. Worry becomes productive when it leads to preparation and counterproductive when it leads to rumination. The difference is action. Productive worry asks, "What can I do to prepare for this potential problem?" Counterproductive worry asks, "What if this terrible thing happens?" Over and over, without generating any useful responses. Guilt and shame are perhaps the most painful emotions to experience, but they also contain some of the most important information about your values and integrity. Guilt tells you when your actions don't align with your values. Shame tells you when your behavior doesn't align with your identity. Both emotions are painful precisely because they indicate misalignment between who you are and who you want to be. Instead of trying to escape guilt and shame, use them as course correction signals. What do these emotions tell you about what you value? What changes do you need to make to better align your actions with your values? How can you use this information to become more consistent with your highest self? The key to transforming any negative emotion is to approach it with curiosity rather than resistance. Instead of asking, "How can I make this feeling go away?" ask, "What is this feeling trying to tell me? How can I use this energy productively? What action can I take that honors the message while moving me toward my goals?" This transformation requires practice and patience. Your habitual response to negative emotions has been reinforced over many years, and it won't change overnight. But every time you choose to transform, rather than suppress or indulge a negative emotion, you build the neural pathways that make this process more automatic. The goal is not to become someone who never experiences negative emotions. The goal is to become someone who can quickly and effectively transform those emotions into fuel for positive action. When you master this skill, you'll discover that setbacks become setups, obstacles become opportunities, and the very experiences that break most people become the experiences that make you stronger. Chapter 10. Building Unshakable Confidence Through Emotional Mastery. Confidence is not what most people think it is. It's not the absence of doubt or fear. It's not the belief that you'll never fail or face challenges. It's not the feeling that you're better than other people or that success is guaranteed. Real confidence is something much deeper and more powerful than any of these surface-level definitions. True confidence is the unshakable knowledge that you can handle whatever life throws at you. It's the quiet certainty that you have the emotional tools, mental frameworks, and inner resources to navigate any challenge, setback, or uncertainty that comes your way. It's not about never falling down. It's about knowing you can always get back up. This kind of confidence can only be built through one process: repeatedly facing difficult situations and proving to yourself that you can handle them with grace and effectiveness. You cannot think your way to confidence. You cannot affirm your way to confidence. You cannot fake your way to confidence. You can only build confidence through evidence, and evidence comes from action. But here's what most people get wrong about building confidence. They think they need to wait until they feel confident before they take action. They think confidence is a prerequisite for facing challenges rather than a result of facing challenges. This backwards thinking keeps them trapped in cycles of self-doubt and limitation because they're waiting for a feeling that can only come from doing the very things they're afraid to do. The confidence-building process works in reverse. You take action despite feeling uncertain or afraid. You handle the situation better than you expected. You extract the lessons and grow stronger. Your brain updates its assessment of your capabilities. Your confidence increases. Then you're ready to take on slightly bigger challenges, and the cycle continues. This is why emotional mastery is the foundation of unshakable confidence. When you know you can control your reactions regardless of what happens. When you know you can stay calm under pressure. When you know you can think clearly, even when emotions are running high. You develop an inner certainty that makes you nearly impossible to shake. Most people's confidence is built on external factors that they can't control. They feel confident when things are going well, when other people approve of them, when they're successful by conventional standards. But this kind of confidence is fragile because it depends on circumstances that can change at any moment. Real confidence is built on internal factors that you can control. The first pillar of unshakable confidence is emotional self-reliance. This is the knowledge that your emotional state is not dependent on other people's behavior, external circumstances, or unpredictable events. You know that you can generate the emotional states you need through your own thoughts, actions, and practices. You don't need other people to make you feel good about yourself. And you don't let other people's negativity drag you down. Emotional self-reliance is built through consistent practice of the emotional regulation techniques you've learned. Every time you successfully manage your emotional state during a challenging situation, you prove to yourself that you have this capability. Every time you choose your response rather than reacting automatically, you build evidence that you're in control of your inner experience. This doesn't mean you become emotionally disconnected from others or that you don't care about relationships. It means you engage with others from a position of strength rather than neediness. You contribute to relationships rather than draining them. You're able to be genuinely supportive of others because you're not constantly seeking support for yourself. The second pillar of unshakable confidence is competence building. Confidence without competence is just delusion. You need to actually be good at things that matter. You need to develop real skills, real knowledge, and real abilities that create genuine value in the world. But competence building is not just about technical skills. It's about developing the meta skills that make you effective in any domain. Problem solving is perhaps the most important meta skill for building confidence. When you know you can figure things out, when you have a systematic approach to breaking down complex challenges and finding solutions, you become much more willing to take on difficult situations. You're not intimidated by unfamiliar problems because you trust your ability to learn and adapt. Communication is another crucial meta skill. When you can express your ideas clearly, listen effectively, and navigate difficult conversations with skill, you become much more confident in social and professional situations. You're not afraid of conflict because you know how to handle it constructively. You're not intimidated by authority figures because you know how to communicate with respect while maintaining your own dignity. Learning agility is the meta skill that makes all other skills possible. This is your ability to quickly acquire new knowledge and capabilities as situations require. When you know you can learn anything you need to learn, you're not limited by your current knowledge base. You become confident about taking on challenges that require skills you don't yet have because you trust your ability to develop those skills. The third pillar of unshakable confidence is integrity alignment. This is the consistency between your values, your words, and your actions. When these three elements are aligned, you develop an inner strength that makes you nearly impossible to shake because you know you're living authentically. When they're misaligned, you feel weak and uncertain because you're not sure who you really are or what you really stand for. Most people compromise their integrity gradually through small decisions that seem insignificant at the time. They tell little lies to avoid discomfort. They make commitments they don't intend to keep. They act in ways that contradict their stated values. Each compromise weakens their inner foundation and erodes their confidence. Building integrity alignment requires ruthless honesty about what you actually value versus what you think you should value. It requires making your word mean something by only making commitments you intend to keep. It requires having the courage to act in accordance with your values, even when it's difficult or costly. When your integrity is intact, you develop what I call unshakable presence. People can sense that you're authentic, that you're not trying to be someone you're not, that you're comfortable with who you are. This presence is magnetic and creates opportunities that are not available to people who are constantly trying to impress others or fit in. The fourth pillar of unshakable confidence is resilience building. This is your track record of recovering from setbacks, learning from failures, and coming back stronger from difficult experiences. Every time you face adversity and emerge better than before, you build evidence that challenges don't break you. They make you stronger. Most people try to avoid adversity, but this actually weakens their confidence because they never prove to themselves that they can handle difficult situations. They remain fragile and fearful because they have no evidence of their own resilience. Building unshakable confidence requires deliberately seeking challenges that test your limits and force you to grow. This doesn't mean being reckless or seeking unnecessary suffering. It means choosing growth over comfort, challenge over security, and expansion over safety. It means taking on projects that scare you, having conversations you've been avoiding, and pursuing goals that require you to become more than you currently are. The key is to approach these challenges with the right mindset. You're not trying to prove that you're already perfect. You're trying to prove that you can learn and grow. You're not trying to never fail. You're trying to prove that you can recover from failure. You're not trying to avoid all mistakes. You're trying to prove that you can learn from mistakes and use them to become better. The fifth pillar of unshakable confidence is future orientation. This is your ability to make decisions based on who you're becoming rather than who you are right now. It's the understanding that your current limitations are temporary and that your potential for growth is virtually unlimited. When you operate from this perspective, present challenges become stepping stones rather than roadblocks. Most people are trapped by their past experiences and current limitations. They think, I'm not good at public speaking, or I'm not a leader, or I'm not confident enough for that opportunity. This fixed mindset keeps them stuck because they base their decisions on current capabilities rather than future potential. Building future orientation requires regularly visualizing the person you're becoming and making decisions from that future identity. Ask yourself, what would the confident version of me do in this situation? Then do that thing. Even if you don't feel ready, act as if you're already the person you want to become. And eventually, you will become that person. The sixth pillar of unshakable confidence is contribution focus. This is the shift from asking, what can I get, to asking, what can I give? When you focus on how you can add value, solve problems, and help others succeed, you become less self-conscious and more naturally confident. You're not worried about being judged because you're focused on being useful. Most confidence issues stem from excessive self-focus. When you're constantly worried about how you look, what other people think, whether you're measuring up, you create anxiety and self-doubt. But when you shift your focus to how you can contribute, serve, and add value, these self-focused concerns naturally fade into the background. This doesn't mean neglecting your own needs or becoming a doormat. It means approaching situations with a service mindset rather than a self-protection mindset. Instead of thinking, I hope I don't embarrass myself, think, how can I help this meeting be productive? Instead of thinking, I hope they like me, think, how can I be genuinely useful to this person? The final element of building unshakable confidence through emotional mastery is developing what I call evidence awareness. This is the practice of consciously recognizing and remembering your successes, growth, and progress, rather than focusing only on your failures and limitations. Most people have a negativity bias that causes them to remember failures more vividly than successes, and to discount their achievements while magnifying their mistakes. This mental pattern systematically undermines confidence by creating a distorted view of their actual track record. Combat this bias by keeping a success journal where you record daily wins, no matter how small. Document challenges you've overcome, skills you've developed, and positive feedback you've received. Review this evidence regularly to maintain an accurate picture of your capabilities and progress. Building unshakable confidence is not about becoming arrogant or believing you're better than others. It's about developing an accurate assessment of your capabilities and a realistic optimism about your potential for continued growth. It's about knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way, not because nothing bad will ever happen, but because you have the tools to deal with whatever does happen. When you combine emotional mastery with competence building, integrity alignment, resilience development, future orientation, contribution focus, and evidence awareness, you create a foundation of confidence that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. You become the kind of person who stays calm in chaos, who sees opportunity in adversity, and who inspires others through your unshakable presence and authentic strength. Chapter 11. The Art of Strategic Non-Reaction in Relationships. Relationships are where emotional control matters most, and where most people fail most spectacularly. You can master your emotions in every other area of your life, but if you lose control with the people closest to you, you'll sabotage the very relationships that matter most. The people who love you see you at your worst, when you're tired, stressed, and emotionally depleted. This is when your true level of emotional mastery is revealed. Most relationship conflicts are not about the surface issue being discussed. They're about underlying emotional patterns, unmet needs, and unconscious triggers that both people are reacting to without awareness. When you learn to not react emotionally during relationship conflicts, you can address the real issues instead of getting caught in endless cycles of blame, defensiveness, and escalation. The first principle of relationship emotional mastery is understanding that every interaction is a choice between connection and control. When you're emotionally reactive, you're choosing control. You're trying to make the other person wrong, to prove your point, to defend your position. But when you choose non-reaction, you're choosing connection. You're prioritizing the relationship over being right. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting unacceptable behavior. It means responding to problematic situations in ways that preserve dignity and create possibilities for resolution, rather than just venting your emotional reactions. It means being strong enough to stay calm when the other person is losing control. The second principle is taking responsibility for your 50% of every interaction. You cannot control the other person's words, actions, or emotional state, but you have complete control over your response to their words, actions, and emotional state. When you focus on controlling your 50% instead of trying to control their 50%, you become incredibly powerful in relationships. Most people spend their relationship energy trying to change, fix, or control their partner, children, or friends. This is exhausting and ineffective because you're trying to control things that are outside your control. When you redirect that energy toward managing your own responses, you become a calming, stabilizing force that actually influences others to be their best selves. The third principle is learning to de-escalate rather than escalate conflicts. When someone is emotionally activated, your natural tendency might be to match their energy level. They raise their voice, so you raise yours. They become critical, so you become defensive. They withdraw, so you pursue. This unconscious mirroring amplifies the conflict instead of resolving it. Strategic non-reaction means consciously choosing to lower the emotional temperature of interactions. Speak more quietly when they speak loudly. Become more curious when they become critical. Give space when they're overwhelmed. This counterintuitive approach often breaks the negative pattern and creates space for actual communication. The fourth principle is separating the person from their behavior. When someone you care about does something hurtful or frustrating, your emotional reaction tends to globalize the behavior. Instead of thinking, they did something inconsiderate, you think they are an inconsiderate person. This generalization makes it much harder to maintain emotional equilibrium and find constructive solutions. Practice seeing difficult behavior as information about the other person's current state rather than evidence of their permanent character. Maybe they're stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or dealing with something you don't know about. This doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it helps you respond with wisdom rather than reactive emotion. The fifth principle is mastering the pause. In heated moments, there's enormous pressure to respond immediately. Silence feels uncomfortable, and you feel compelled to defend, explain, or counterattack right away. But the pause is where your power lies. It's where you can choose your response instead of being controlled by your impulses. Practice saying, "I need a moment to think about that," or "Let me consider what you're saying," or simply taking 3 deep breaths before responding. These small pauses can completely change the trajectory of a conversation and often prevent conflicts that would have taken days or weeks to repair. The most advanced relationship skill is emotional aikido. This is the ability to redirect someone else's emotional energy rather than absorbing it or fighting against it. When someone is angry at you, instead of getting defensive or angry back, you acknowledge their feelings and redirect the conversation toward solutions. When someone is criticizing you, instead of justifying your actions, you thank them for their perspective and ask for their suggestions. This approach requires tremendous emotional strength because it goes against every instinct to defend yourself when you feel attacked. But it's incredibly effective because it de-energizes conflict and redirects the interaction toward cooperation instead of competition. Remember, you cannot control whether other people choose to be emotionally reactive, but you can control whether you join them in that reactivity. When you consistently choose non-reaction in relationships, you become a source of stability and peace that others gravitate toward. You become the person others turn to during difficult times because they know you won't add to the chaos. Chapter 12. Emotional Leadership and Influence. Leadership is fundamentally about emotional influence. Your ability to inspire, motivate, and guide others depends far more on your emotional mastery than on your technical skills or positional authority. People follow leaders who make them feel confident, capable, and valued. They resist leaders who create anxiety, frustration, or self-doubt, regardless of how smart or experienced those leaders might be. The most powerful form of leadership is emotional modeling. People learn more from what you do than from what you say, especially when it comes to emotional responses. When you remain calm under pressure, others feel permission to be calm. When you respond to setbacks with resilience and problem-solving, others learn to do the same. When you treat difficulties as challenges rather than catastrophes, you teach others to adopt that perspective. This means that every emotional choice you make as a leader is not just about you. It's about the emotional culture you're creating for everyone around you. Your team, your family, your organization will tend to mirror your emotional patterns. If you're reactive, they'll become reactive. If you're anxious, they'll become anxious. If you're calm and solution-focused, they'll adopt those qualities. The first skill of emotional leadership is creating psychological safety. This is the feeling that people can express ideas, ask questions, admit mistakes, and show vulnerability without fear of judgment, punishment, or rejection. Psychological safety is created through your emotional responses to other people's imperfections and uncertainties. When someone makes a mistake, your first response sets the tone. If you react with anger, blame, or criticism, you teach everyone to hide their mistakes and avoid taking risks. If you respond with curiosity about what can be learned and focus on preventing similar mistakes in the future, you create an environment where people feel safe to be honest and innovative. The second skill is emotional contagion management. Emotions are literally contagious through mirror neuron activity and social conditioning. When you walk into a room, your emotional state influences everyone else's emotional state, often unconsciously. This gives you enormous power to influence the energy and productivity of any group. Before entering important interactions, consciously choose the emotional state you want to transmit. If you want the meeting to be productive and collaborative, embody those qualities yourself. If you want your team to feel confident about a challenging project, make sure you genuinely feel and express confidence. If you want your family to feel peaceful and connected, bring that energy to your interactions. The third skill is strategic emotional authenticity. This doesn't mean expressing every emotion you feel without filter. It means being genuine about your emotional state while choosing expressions that serve the situation and the people involved. You can be authentically concerned about a problem while expressing that concern in ways that motivate rather than discourage. Sometimes authenticity means sharing your vulnerabilities and uncertainties to create connection and trust. Other times it means projecting strength and confidence to help others feel secure. The key is matching your emotional expression to what the situation requires while remaining true to your core values and character. The fourth skill is conflict transformation. Most people either avoid conflict or handle it poorly, but leaders must be able to navigate disagreements and tensions in ways that strengthen rather than damage relationships. This requires seeing conflict as information about differing perspectives and unmet needs, rather than as personal attacks or character defects. When conflict arises, your emotional response determines whether it becomes destructive or constructive. If you remain calm, curious, and focused on understanding different viewpoints, you can often transform conflicts into breakthrough conversations that lead to better solutions and stronger relationships. The fifth skill is empathetic leadership without emotional absorption. You need to be able to understand and relate to other people's emotional experiences without taking on their emotional states as your own. This means you can be compassionate towards someone who's anxious without becoming anxious yourself. You can be supportive of someone who's going through difficulties without being dragged down by their problems. This balance requires strong emotional boundaries and a clear sense of your own emotional identity. You care about others deeply, but you don't lose yourself in their emotional experiences. You provide stability and support precisely because you maintain your own emotional center. The ultimate goal of emotional leadership is creating what I call an upward emotional spiral. This is when your emotional mastery inspires others to develop their own emotional mastery, which creates a positive feedback loop that elevates everyone's performance and well-being. Instead of managing other people's emotions, you're developing their capacity to manage their own emotions. This happens when you consistently model emotional intelligence, provide tools and frameworks for emotional development, celebrate emotional growth in others, and create environments where emotional mastery is valued and rewarded. Over time, you build teams, families, and organizations that are emotionally resilient, highly productive, and deeply fulfilling to be part of. Chapter 13. Creating your personal emotional operating system. Everything you've learned means nothing unless you create a systematic approach to implementing it in your daily life. Most people consume information about emotional control but never develop the consistent practices that turn knowledge into automatic behavior. They understand the concepts intellectually, but continue operating from old emotional patterns because they haven't created new systems to replace the old ones. Your emotional operating system is the set of daily practices, environmental designs, and response protocols that make emotional mastery your default mode, rather than something you have to consciously remember to do. Just like a computer operating system runs in the background and manages all the basic functions automatically, your emotional operating system should manage your emotional responses automatically. The first component is your daily emotional fitness routine. Just like physical fitness requires regular exercise, emotional fitness requires regular practice. This doesn't need to be complicated or time-consuming, but it does need to be consistent. 5 to 10 minutes of focused emotional training every day will create more transformation than hours of sporadic effort. Your routine should include some form of mindfulness or meditation practice to strengthen your awareness of emotional states as they arise. It should include breathing exercises to train your nervous system to respond to stress with calm rather than reactivity. It should include some form of cognitive work, like journaling or reflection, to identify patterns and plan improvements. The second component is environmental design for emotional success. Your physical and social environment has an enormous impact on your emotional state, often without your conscious awareness. If you're constantly exposed to negative news, chaotic spaces, or emotionally reactive people, you'll find it much harder to maintain emotional equilibrium regardless of your skills and intentions. Audit your environment ruthlessly. What inputs are you consuming through media, social media, books and conversations? What does your physical space communicate about calm and order versus chaos and stress? Who are you spending time with? And how do they influence your emotional state? Make changes that support the emotional state you want to maintain. The third component is trigger identification and response planning. You need to become intimately familiar with your personal emotional triggers and have specific strategies ready for each one. This is not about avoiding triggers, which is impossible and counterproductive, but about having planned responses that align with your values and goals. Keep a trigger journal for 2 weeks. Every time you have an emotional reaction, write down what triggered it, what you felt, how you responded, and what you wish you had done differently. Look for patterns in the types of situations, people, and circumstances that tend to activate you. Then develop specific response strategies for each category of trigger. The fourth component is recovery protocols. You need systematic ways to restore your emotional equilibrium after challenging situations or periods of high stress. Without effective recovery protocols, emotional challenges accumulate and eventually overwhelm your capacity to maintain control. Your recovery toolkit should include immediate techniques you can use in the moment, short-term practices you can implement within hours of a stressful event, and longer-term restoration practices for recovering from extended periods of high stress or emotional challenge. Have these ready before you need them, not after. The fifth component is accountability and measurement systems. You need ways to track your progress, identify areas for improvement, and maintain motivation during difficult periods. This could be as simple as a daily rating of your emotional control on a scale of 1 to 10, or as sophisticated as keeping detailed logs of specific situations and responses. The key is having objective measures of progress rather than relying on feelings, which can be unreliable indicators of actual improvement. You might feel like you're not making progress even when you're actually improving significantly. or you might feel like you're doing well when you're actually sliding backwards. The sixth component is continuous learning and adaptation. Your emotional operating system should evolve as you grow and as your life circumstances change. What works in your 20s might not work in your 40s. What works when you're single might not work when you're married with children. What works during stable periods might not work during major life transitions. Schedule regular reviews of your emotional operating system. What's working well? What needs adjustment? What new challenges are you facing that require new strategies? What feedback are you getting from others about your emotional patterns? Use this information to continuously refine and improve your approach. The final component is integration with your larger life systems. Your emotional operating system cannot be separate from your other life management systems. It needs to be integrated with your goal-setting process, your time management approach, your relationship strategies, and your career development plans. This means making emotional considerations part of every major decision you make. Before taking on new responsibilities, consider the emotional demands they'll create. Before entering new relationships, consider how they'll impact your emotional well-being. Before pursuing new goals, consider what emotional skills you'll need to develop to achieve them successfully. Remember, the goal is not to create a perfect system that never needs adjustment. The goal is to create a robust system that makes emotional mastery easier and more automatic, while remaining flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances. Your emotional operating system should serve you, not constrain you. Chapter 14. Advanced Applications in High-Stakes Environments. The ultimate test of your emotional mastery comes in high-stakes environments, where the consequences of losing control are severe and immediate. These are situations where careers can be destroyed with a single emotional outburst, where relationships can be permanently damaged by one reactive moment, where opportunities worth millions of dollars can be lost because someone couldn't manage their anxiety or anger. High-stakes environments reveal the difference between intellectual understanding of emotional control and true embodied mastery. When everything is on the line, when you're being tested beyond your comfort zone, when the pressure is intense and the stakes are real, your true level of emotional development becomes clear. The first category of high-stakes environments is crisis management. When something goes seriously wrong, when there's immediate danger or significant loss, when people are looking to you for leadership and stability, your emotional response sets the tone for everyone else's response. Panic is contagious, but so is calm competence. In crisis situations, the ability to think clearly while others are losing their minds becomes a superpower. While everyone else is being hijacked by their amygdala, you remain connected to your prefrontal cortex. While others are reacting to the emotional intensity of the situation, you're focusing on the practical steps needed to address the actual problems. This requires advanced preparation. You cannot develop crisis emotional management skills during the crisis. You develop them during calm periods through visualization, stress inoculation training, and practice with smaller challenges. By the time the real crisis hits, your emotional control responses need to be automatic. The second category is high-pressure negotiations and confrontations. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, handling a workplace conflict, or dealing with aggressive behavior from others, your ability to remain emotionally centered gives you enormous strategic advantages. People reveal their true intentions and limitations when they're emotionally activated, but they can only take advantage of your emotional reactions if you have them. The key to negotiation emotional mastery is separating your ego from the outcome. When you're emotionally invested in being right, in getting your way, or in proving your point, you become predictable and manipulable. When you can remain detached from any specific outcome while staying committed to your core interests, you become incredibly difficult to manipulate or intimidate. This doesn't mean not caring about the outcome. It means caring more about the process than the result. More about maintaining your integrity than winning the negotiation. More about finding solutions that work for everyone than getting everything you want. The third category is performance under scrutiny. When you're presenting to important audiences, being evaluated for promotions, competing at high levels, or otherwise performing while being watched and judged, emotional control becomes crucial for accessing your full capabilities. Performance anxiety, imposter syndrome, and fear of judgment can completely undermine your actual skills and preparation. The solution is shifting focus from how you're being perceived to how you're serving others. Instead of thinking about whether you look confident, think about how you can provide value to your audience. Instead of worrying about making mistakes, focus on executing the process you've prepared. Instead of trying to impress others, concentrate on being genuinely helpful. The fourth category is dealing with extremely difficult people. Every field has people who are manipulative, aggressive, unreasonable, or emotionally volatile. Your ability to maintain your center while interacting with these individuals determines whether they drain your energy and compromise your effectiveness, or whether you can work with them productively despite their limitations. The key is not taking their behavior personally. Difficult people are usually difficult with everyone, not just you. Their emotional reactions are about their internal state, not about you specifically. When you can see their behavior as information about their stress level, insecurity, or coping skills rather than as personal attacks, you can respond strategically rather than reactively. The fifth category is managing your own success and failure. Both extreme success and extreme failure can trigger powerful emotional responses that lead to poor decisions. Success can trigger arrogance, complacency, or reckless risk-taking. Failure can trigger shame, despair, or the impulse to give up entirely. Emotional mastery means maintaining perspective and emotional equilibrium regardless of external outcomes. Success is information about what worked, not evidence that you're permanently superior. Failure is information about what didn't work, not evidence that you're permanently inadequate. Both are temporary conditions that require appropriate responses rather than emotional reactions. The ultimate high-stakes environment is your own mind during moments of extreme challenge, uncertainty, or change. When everything you've counted on seems to be falling apart. When the future feels completely uncertain. When you're facing losses or changes that challenge your identity and assumptions about how life works. Your relationship with your own thoughts and emotions becomes the most important factor in your ability to navigate the situation successfully. This is where all your emotional mastery training pays off. When external circumstances are chaotic, you become your own source of stability. When others are panicking about the uncertainty, you become comfortable with not knowing. When everyone else is being overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge, you break it down into manageable steps and take them one at a time. The goal is not to become someone who never feels the emotional impact of high-stakes situations. The goal is to become someone who can feel that impact fully while choosing responses that serve your long-term interests and values, rather than just relieving the immediate emotional pressure. Chapter 15. The compound effect of emotional mastery. Most people dramatically underestimate the long-term impact of emotional control because they only see the immediate effects of individual emotional choices. They see that staying calm during one argument prevented a fight, or that managing anxiety during one presentation led to better performance, or that not reacting to one criticism preserved a relationship. These immediate benefits are significant, but they're nothing compared to the compound effects that build over months, years, and decades. Emotional mastery works like compound interest. Each individual choice to respond, rather than react, seems small in the moment, but these choices accumulate exponentially over time. Every time you choose emotional control, you're not just improving that one situation. You're strengthening neural pathways that make emotional control easier in all future situations. You're building a reputation for reliability and wisdom that creates opportunities. You're developing inner resources that compound and multiply. The first compound effect is relational trust. Every time you remain calm when others expect you to lose control, every time you respond with wisdom when others are being reactive, every time you choose connection over being right, you make deposits in the trust accounts of your relationships. Over time, these deposits create deep reservoirs of trust that become incredibly valuable during difficult periods. People know they can count on you when things get tough. They seek your perspective during challenging decisions. They want you on their team during high-pressure projects. They trust you with their vulnerabilities and their most important concerns. This level of trust opens doors that remain closed to people who are emotionally unpredictable. The second compound effect is reputation and influence. Your emotional patterns become part of your personal brand, often more important than your technical skills or achievements. People remember how you made them feel much more than what you accomplished. When you consistently demonstrate emotional mastery, you develop a reputation as someone who can be trusted with important responsibilities and challenging situations. This reputation creates a positive feedback loop. You get opportunities that require emotional maturity. Successfully handling these opportunities builds your skills and confidence. Your enhanced capabilities lead to even greater opportunities. Over time, you become known as someone who performs well under pressure, who can be counted on during crises, who brings stability to chaotic situations. The third compound effect is decision-making quality. When you're not being driven by emotional reactions, you make consistently better decisions across every area of your life. You choose relationships based on compatibility and shared values rather than intense chemistry that burns out quickly. You make career choices based on long-term growth potential rather than immediate gratification or fear-based security. You invest money based on rational analysis rather than greed or fear. You choose how to spend your time based on your priorities and goals, rather than whatever feels urgent in the moment. You handle conflicts based on what will strengthen relationships, rather than what will make you feel better immediately. These better decisions compound over time into dramatically better life outcomes. The fourth compound effect is stress, resilience, and health benefits. Chronic emotional reactivity creates chronic stress, which has devastating effects on physical and mental health over time. Elevated cortisol levels damage your immune system, impair cognitive function, accelerate aging, and increase risk for virtually every major disease. Chronic stress literally shortens your lifespan. When you master emotional control, you dramatically reduce your stress levels and improve your health outcomes. You sleep better, think more clearly, have more energy, and maintain better physical health. These health benefits compound over decades, potentially adding years to your life and significantly improving the quality of those years. The fifth compound effect is learning acceleration. When you're not constantly dealing with emotional drama and reactivity, you free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy that can be redirected toward growth and learning. Instead of spending your energy managing the consequences of emotional reactions, you can invest that energy in developing new skills, pursuing meaningful goals, and expanding your capabilities. Emotional mastery also makes you a better learner by improving your ability to receive feedback, handle criticism, and learn from failures. When you're not defensive or reactive, you can extract lessons from challenging experiences instead of just being traumatized by them. This accelerated learning creates competitive advantages that compound over time. The sixth compound effect is opportunity creation. When you have emotional mastery, you become the kind of person that other high performers want to work with. You get invited to join important projects, teams, and organizations. You become trusted with sensitive information and critical responsibilities. You gain access to networks and relationships that create opportunities for advancement and achievement. These opportunities often lead to more opportunities in an upward spiral of growth and success. Each success builds your confidence and capabilities, making you ready for even greater challenges and opportunities. Over time, you gain access to levels of achievement and influence that seemed impossible when you were still trapped in emotional reactivity. The seventh compound effect is inner peace and life satisfaction. Perhaps most importantly, emotional mastery creates a deep sense of inner peace and life satisfaction that comes from knowing you're living according to your values and responding to life from wisdom rather than fear. You develop an inner stability that's not dependent on external circumstances. This inner peace is not the absence of challenge or difficulty. It's the presence of confidence that you can handle whatever life presents. You know that external circumstances are temporary, but your ability to respond with wisdom and grace is permanent. This creates a quality of life that's available regardless of your circumstances. The ultimate compound effect of emotional mastery is becoming anti-fragile. This means you don't just survive challenges and setbacks. You become stronger because of them. Every difficult situation becomes an opportunity to practice and strengthen your emotional skills. Every person who tries to manipulate or upset you becomes unwitting training for greater mastery. When you reach this level of emotional development, you become virtually unshakable, not because nothing difficult ever happens to you, but because you have unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever does happen. You become a source of strength and stability for others, a person who makes every situation better simply by being present and emotionally centered. This is not just about personal success or achievement, though those will certainly follow. This is about becoming the kind of person who contributes to raising the emotional intelligence and maturity of everyone around you. You become part of the solution to the emotional reactivity and dysfunction that plagues so much of human interaction. The choice is yours. You can continue living at the mercy of your emotional reactions, letting temporary feelings drive permanent decisions, remaining trapped in cycles of regret and limitation. Or you can commit to the patient, consistent practice of emotional mastery and unlock the compound benefits that will transform every aspect of your life. The time to start is now. Not tomorrow when you feel more motivated. Not next week when your schedule is clearer. Not next year when your life is less stressful. Now. Because every day you delay is another day of lost compound interest on the most important investment you can make, the investment in your own emotional development and inner mastery.